Thank you, Madam Clerk. I will call the meeting to order. Welcome, everybody. Groundhog Day. It sounds like, according to Willie, we're going to have an early spring, which will be great. So I'll move on to the agenda, down to our land acknowledgement statement. We acknowledge with respect the history, spirituality, and culture of the Aniashinaabeg, the people of the three fires known as Ojibwe, Odawa, Potawatomi nations who have inhabited this land from time immemorial. And further give thanks to Chippewa Saugeen, Chippewa Nawash, now known as the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation, as the traditional keepers of this land. We also recognize the Métis and Inuit whose ancestors shared this land and these waters. May we all, as treaty people, live with respect on this land and live in peace and friendship with all its diverse people. Approval of the agenda. Is there any add-ons to the agenda here tonight? Seeing none, the recommendation is that the agenda be approved as presented. Someone to move, put it on the floor, please. Moved by Councillor Colburn, second by Councillor Thompson. Is there any discussion on the motion before us? Seeing none, a show of hands, all in favor? The motion is carried. Declaration of pecuniary interest. You can clear anytime you see fit during the meeting. We're down to minutes of the previous minutes. The recommendation is that the minutes of the council meeting held on January 12th, 2022 be adopted. Someone to move to put on the floor, please. Moved by Deputy Mayor Carlton, second by Councillor Sullivan. Is there any discussion on the motion before us? Seeing none, a show of hands, all in favor? The motion is carried. We're down to announcements. I would like to make an announcement concerning a fantastic piece of art that's going on in the Oxenden General Store by Charmaine Jennifer. She's a well-known native artist. And Madam Clerk, could we please put that email on our website so that we could, the public could see it?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So through you and through council, we will share the article that the mayor has referenced on social media as well as on the township website for the public to view and further share.
Thank you. It's an amazing piece of art. It's called The Crane, and it's just a beautiful piece of art. Moving on, we were down to delegations. We have a delegation here tonight from the Grey County and United Way Grey. I will now welcome Paul Wagner of United Way, Bruce Gray, and Barb Fetty of the County Grey to the floor. Please go ahead. And I believe, Paul, you were going to take this on, or?
Yes, I will. Thank you very much.
Hi, Barb.
One moment, just getting this set up. And I trust that everyone can see that.
Yes, we can.
Perfect. So thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. We'd like to discuss food insecurity in our region, as well as a new tool to help build awareness of this issue. Food insecurity is a hidden issue in many of our communities. Not having enough food affects far more people than most of us realize. We need to inform, to educate, to correct misconceptions, and demonstrate the size and scope of this issue. Any conversation about food insecurity needs to begin with the size of our region. Grey Bruce encompasses 8,000 square kilometers, which is the same area as the GTA. In that area, there are 22 food banks, 19 meal programs, and 15 community gardens. These organizations are mostly run by volunteers. Distance and geography aren't the only issues that food organizations face in Grey Bruce. Funding is a significant issue for many of the organizations that struggle to meet the increasing demands of food insecurity. The precarious nature of funding changes from year to year, and many times organizations are only advised that funding's been approved just days before the previous funding runs out. In fact, 3 programs last year suspended operations because their funding was not renewed. The lack of connectivity is another obstacle for organizations trying to address food insecurity in our region. Many food organizations have grown organically in isolation. Some exist in silos, and as a result, they don't share protocols or ideas. Unfortunately, this has also contributed to keeping the issue out of the public's mind. The lack of a reliable and a timely method of sharing food between the organizations is also a significant issue, as many rely on an ad hoc volunteer network of seniors in their cars. Food organizations provide their services in some of the most challenging and changeable weather conditions anywhere. Not only is winter driving difficult, in summer, hot weather threatens food spoilage as well. One of the best things about living in a small town or a small city is that everyone knows everyone else and pulls together. Unfortunately, this is also one of the biggest problems. Many people are embarrassed by their situation and oftentimes would rather go hungry than have to approach their neighbors for help or even to admit that they need help. Seniors will quite often avoid using support because they believe that other people need help more than they do. Repeated studies show that only 1 person in 4 who should use a food bank actually does, and stigma is one of the leading reasons, as it can be very embarrassing to be seen waiting for assistance. Misconceptions also affect food insecurity. One of the most common ones is the lack of understanding about the difference between best before dates and expiry dates, which leads to excessive food wastage. Most importantly, people, the media, and decision makers are largely unaware of the size and scope of food insecurity. They see how wealthy our communities are, and they see the amount of food that seems to be available. When they do happen to think about food insecurity, typically they only think about food banks, and they'll donate some canned or dry goods and feel that they've contributed to solving the food problem. Food banks, despite all of the good work they do, are at best a Band-Aid, and at worst, they lull people into not appreciating the real causes of food insecurity. We need to educate people that food insecurity is only a symptom. It's a symptom of poverty, and in particular, the lack of safe and affordable housing. Currently, because of skyrocketing prices for rental and owning a home, many people are paying 80, 90, and even 100% of their income on housing, leaving nothing left for food or other necessities of life. Many people are surprised to learn that increasingly more middle-class families are suffering from food insecurity. The problems with the perception that food banks are the only solution to food insecurity include the fact that most food banks typically only provide 3 or 4 days worth of food once per month. Newcomers to the community may not be able to find food banks due to limited signing. Clients still have to prove that they're poor enough, which can be very degrading, and the lack of food choices can be challenging. In fact, many food banks don't stock fresh fruits or vegetables because of the potential of spoiling. In addition, stigma can exist because some volunteers often have preconceived ideas about who's deserving and who's undeserving. Please don't get me wrong, food banks do great work, particularly all of the ones that we have in Grey Bruce, but they're only part of the solution. Given all of these issues and more besides, what we're trying to do is build collaboration and connection between all of the food organizations and the communities that they serve by removing silos, encouraging the sharing of good practices, and trying to remove stigma. To make people aware and to engage decision makers, we needed a tool to inform, to educate, and to correct those misconceptions. To do that, we need more than just anecdotal information. We needed data and the ability to easily communicate that data. There was a tool already, the biannual hunger reports that were produced. They were only produced every other year, so there were some problems with that because the data was old even when they were first reported. The reports were not readily accessible, and not every organization participated in the data collection. Something better was needed. An idea from the United Way of Bruce Gray was actualized in action by NPX, and they developed the website foodbrucegray.com in only 6 weeks. They created a tool that shows the size and scope of the food insecurity issue here. It's clear and it's concise. It's easy to use. It uses the data that was already being collected by the volunteers. It's available immediately and allows the start of conversations about who's hungry in our communities. This is that tool. The website foodbrucegray.com. There are 3 data entry screens for food banks, meal programs, and for community gardens. Each was designed to use whatever data the organizations were already producing, even if they're not collecting all of the data points. It was very important to us not to create more work for the volunteers. This is the first of 6 graphs that measures the contributions. This particular one is the community meal programs. Interestingly, public awareness of meal programs was almost non-existent. In Bruce Grey, demand grew for community meal programs by more than 300% in the first months of the pandemic and has continued to stay that high, despite the dramatic reduction in volunteers able to assist with meal distribution. FoodBruceGray.com tries to make more people aware of their contribution. When you look at the graph, I should point out that it's not that we solved food insecurity in December. When I made up this slide, there is a lag between getting all the organizations to report their data. But when you look at this, the 304,000 meals represents the number of meals provided to food insecure people in Grey Bruce since January of 2020. You can go in by using a drop-down menu to look at any of the individual organizations that contribute that data. And the plateauing that you see in this graph has more to do with the lack of capacity rather than does the lack of demand. In fact, demand has never been higher. The second graph shows food rescue. According to Second Harvest Canada, 58% of all the food produced in Canada ends up in landfills. On a local scale, food rescue tries to divert that food by working with our local grocery stores, local businesses, restaurants, and farmers. More of this food is now being used to help the vulnerable and food insecure people across the 2 counties. This is the first of 2 graphs on food banks. Please note that you can adjust the time period. I have this one going from January of 2020 right up until last month, but you can go in and adjust that very, very easily. You'll also notice the 305,000 number represents 305,000 kilograms worth of food that the food banks have distributed throughout the 2 counties. And 29,800 food bundles that were distributed as well. You'll notice that except for Christmas time, the demand was relatively steady. And the CERB that was in place actually represented the effects of a universal income, which helped to flatten things out. The demographic screen shows the income sources and age breakdown for the clients. The bottom graph, if you notice it, the green represents the number of children accessing food banks, yellow adults, and the red is seniors, or it might be pink on your screen. This graph shows the contribution of the community gardens. In the first graph, the 16,000 kilograms represents the food that the community gardens grew as a whole. Of that, on the second graph, 12,731 kilograms was donated to meal programs. These programs have done a tremendous job throughout the pandemic, as have the meal programs and the food banks. The final graph really showcases this. It's the thousands of hours that volunteers have provided to help with food insecurity. At the end of the year, that number was actually up over 60,000 hours. When it was launched, this NPX created tool was unique in Canada. It's been showcased by Tamarack, TVO, the CBC, and the Toronto Star. Local media has picked up quite a few stories, and it was recently a finalist in the Pillar Community Innovation Awards. We've sent invitations to every mayor, chief, MPP, and MP, as well as every media outlet in the region to inform them about this tool and to encourage them to use it to start conversations in their communities. The tool foodbrucegrade.com gathers data and helps to engage communities and relies on them to create action plans. The tool is being used to utilize new and existing programming for grant applications and on municipal websites and also the local media. Sorry. To continue, we do have challenges. What we want to do is get all of the organizations to continue to share their data with us, to use that collected data to spur more conversations and solutions to food insecurity, particularly with decision makers such as yourselves. We want to expand food rescue, and again, we want to inspire conversations on food insecurity and solutions from the community. I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today and appreciate your support in helping to illuminate this large but mostly hidden issue. I've covered a lot of information very quickly, and if you have any questions, we would be happy to answer them for you.
Thank you, Paul, for a great presentation. I was wondering, before we go to council for questions, I wonder, Ms. Fetty, would you want to make any comments? Barb?
Thank you. Your Worship. This is a great opportunity for us to bring this tool to you, and I appreciate the time that you're sharing with us. We have been attending municipal councils, and I think in the very near future, we're actually on the agenda for county councils. So this might sound a little familiar for Deputy Mayor Sue and Mayor Burley. We're at a point now where we're very excited about ensuring that people have awareness, that we build this process. We're very lucky to have had the partnerships with NPX to be able to produce it. And I think we've all got neighbors, family, friends that are going through some really difficult times. And so it's a wicked problem. They call them wicked problems because there's not one solution. This is just part of the solution. And I'm very excited about the work that's happened through the food security action table of the Poverty Task Force. And so I would just maybe ask if Jill would also maybe have some highlighting comments as well, and certainly hope that you do have some questions that we can provide some answers to.
Thank you, Barb. Jill, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mayor Burley. I would just like to add, we've been talking poverty issues and we've come before your council over the last 10 years. What's really exciting about this tool is we have more than anecdotal stories. We have come with our community voices and getting ahead programs, and we've had the individual stories. What we're really looking at right now with this tool is the community food security issue. What is it at large, and what's the impact? And we are seeing, as Paul indicated, more and more middle-class people with income going to the food banks or even considering community meal programs. We have not seen that a lot of that before. So I think it's really critical right now is that we have the data, and that you can make informed decisions around what's happening in Georgian Bluffs and how can you support people. It's an income solution that needs to be taken, quite frankly, from our perspective at the Poverty Task Force. We are not going to get ourselves out of food insecurity by just donating tin goods, as Paul said. We really need to look at the larger issues around a livable wage, around the benefits, the sick days. We saw the CERB come in and support and float a lot of people, but we don't have that income support coming this year. So at the Poverty Task Force, we really are advocating for income solutions so that we can address some of the issues around the cost of housing and around the cost of food. Thank you.
Thank you, Jill. I'll open the floor up to council. Does council have any questions? Deputy Mayor Carlton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess my question would be is, in what way can we as a municipality help? What are you looking for from us that we can do to support all of this?
The very best thing that we could ask for that is for you to provide a link on your website to foodbrucegray.com. Quite a few of the municipalities have done that, and it's a tool that people can look at to see what's going on in our community. Right now, what we're trying to do is build awareness of the problem. When we started doing this more than a year ago, everybody's willing to help, but nobody knew that it was a problem. So, our first step was to build awareness, and that would be a great way.
Secondly, as part of Roma and as part of the other avenues of advocacy, I know the latest paper that went from Roma to the Ontario budget consultations highlighted a lot of issues around income solutions, housing solutions, things that we need to address collectively as Grey County, but also individual municipalities have a role to play. We have seen some municipalities such as Kincardine and Saugeen Shores start to tackle some of the issues, such as providing a spectrum of housing possibilities for people at all levels, not just low income, because we're really losing the edge on some of our middle class families who are unable to find housing. They can find jobs, but unable to find affordable housing. Some of those young families that are coming back to our area, double income and still can't afford a house. And I'm sure you know that in Georgian Bluffs, as your community has, some of the higher priced housing, which is beneficial for retirees, but it's very challenging for young families. So I think if you're to look at supporting some of the income solutions, engaging with employers and the business sector that you do, as well as looking at some of the housing solutions. That would go a long way for the council.
Thank you, Jill. Councillor Barfa, go ahead, please. Carol, I believe you're muted.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just have a couple questions for some of your guests there and a comment. First of all, I'll give you the positive comment first. Okay, as a senior and living on my own, I have learned that, you know, we have to share. So I get a hold of a family member and say, gee, I made a great buy on a bushel of tomatoes. Do you want to get together and we'll do up a bunch of sauce? You have to work together. You got to reach our hands out. It's not just giving, it's sharing. So just food for thought for seniors, because you go to the big box stores and everything there pretty well is for more than one person. So just food for thought. Another thing, you tackled affordable housing. I don't know how you're ever going to tackle that until you convince the municipalities. For example, I read in the paper, sure it's a mistake, that the average income in Owen Sound area is $75,000. Well, I don't know who's making that kind of money, but let me tell you one thing. If you're a landlord and you've got apartments and you can only put your rent up, according to the Rent Review Board, less than 1%, but your water and sewer and taxes and everything else goes up way more than that, it's a losing battle. So, you know, I don't know how you convince municipalities to stop and take a look at this. Yes, there has to be more affordable housing, but at what cost?
Mm-hmm.
Well, if I could address that point, one of the things that we found, you know, in talking to all the 50 different organizations that help support food insecurity through Grey Bruce, is that overwhelmingly the big issue for a lot of them is that they simply can't afford to live here. I was talking to a gentleman in Paisley at the food bank, nice young guy, has had a good truck. He's living in that truck in the park because there isn't anywhere for him to live. He has money, he's quite prepared to pay. But you know, when we talk about affordable housing, it means something different to everybody. When you talk to a developer, affordable housing might be a house that's $400,000. When you talk to a family, a young family, an affordable house might be $150,000. When you're looking at apartments and things like that, affordable housing and geared to income housing, all right, you should, according to the Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation, you should spend between 30 and 40% of your income on housing. And as I mentioned in the presentation, there's a lot of people that are spending almost all of their money on that. In fact, quite a few of them. If you happen to be living on a fixed income, the erosion of your buying power has virtually disappeared. And one of the things that we found, particularly with the increases in housing prices, on paper, people have assets that are worth a lot of money. But from a practical point of view, they still only have the same amount of cash coming in that they did before. And you know, that's the struggle that people have. And for the first time in a generation, we're having to deal with inflation. You know, so what was difficult before is becoming almost impossible now. I wish I had the solutions. I'd probably be a lot wealthier than I am. But what we do need to do is to build awareness of the problem. And the more aware that people are of the problem, the more solutions that we'll find. And the only way out of this, to use your very first point, is to share resources, share information, and share solutions.
Thank you, Paul. Councillor Barfoot, did you have another question, or?
I don't want to take up your time. I'm sort of opinionated on this. I contribute to the food bank. I feel bad. I don't mind sharing. It's a good, to give is a good feeling. And there are lots of people out there that cannot afford to give.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll see, I've seen it at the grocery stores. We probably all have people putting stuff in the boxes there for the Salvation Army and that. But this is also taxing on those people.
Very much so. That's one of the reasons why we keep track of the volunteer hours. If you used volunteer.ca's website and the valuation that they had for volunteer hours in 2018, the amount of payroll dollars that volunteers have contributed would be over $1 million.
It's amazing. Thank you, Paul, and thank you, Councillor Barfoot. Does any other council member have any concerns? Welcome, Councillor Pringle. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There, yeah. Sorry, I was a little bit late getting to the meeting here today, but yeah, no, I just had more of a comment than anything too, and I think you're definitely on the right track with bringing awareness. Because after I read that, I went through that presentation of the night. There was numbers there that I obviously never known or ever seen before. So for me, it was an awareness to the situation in the area, and the comparisons were great. So I think you're definitely going down the right path as far as getting the awareness piece out there for people to know what is going on. I'm kind of with Councillor Barfoot a wee bit on the share piece is a great idea too. And then the next piece for me was the housing piece, and that is an issue in our area. We're limited to what we can do in our township here with the geographics that we have. And I'm well aware with two 25-year-olds at home here trying to get them out of the house, and it's a real challenge because they want to stay here and in the area. And I thought that was an awesome presentation, and hoping nothing but the best moving forward.
Thank you, Councillor Pringle. The other thing that goes along with that same thing, Jill and Paul and Barb, is that we live in rural Ontario, and transportation is a big part of this whole issue because it makes a lot of stumbling blocks for people to try and locate away from the GTA area, and that's very hard to deal with. And I think we're all aware of the problems, and hope we can all work together and solve it. Does council have any other questions? Sorry, Madam Clerk. Go ahead, Brittany, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So in summation, it sounds as though council is in support of sharing the educational resource that our delegates have shared with us this evening. So to formalize that direction, if council would be so obliged, I would recommend that we do so by motion, directing staff to share the link for foodgradebrews.com on the township website. So should council be in favor, we need a mover and a seconder and a vote, please.
Thank you, Brittany. It was moved by Deputy Mayor Carlton, second by Councillor Pringle. Is there any discussion on the motion before us? Show of hands, all in favor? That motion is carried. Again, thank you, Jill, Barb, Paul, for giving a great presentation here tonight. And everyone, you're more than welcome to come to a George West Council meeting anytime you wish.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
So I'm going to move on to our agenda. We are now down to our consent agenda. Does any member of council wish to pull anything from our consent agenda? Councillor Barfoot? You're muted, Carol.
I missed out on an opportunity there, Mr. Mayor. But if any of our guests would like to attend another council meeting, I think the council should take and put a food donation box out by our back door. So don't come empty-handed, bring a donation.
Thank you, Carol. So I do not see any items to be moved from the consent agenda. So the recommendation is that the Council Township of Georgian Bus adopt the consent agenda for information. Someone to move to put it on the floor, please. Moved by Councillor Colburn, second by Councillor Thompson. Is there any discussion on the motion before us? See none, a show of hands, all in favor? The motion is carried. We're down to correspondence. We have one piece of correspondence from Honorable Stephen Clark. It's mainly for information, and Madam Clerk, you can speak to this.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So just briefly for council's information, as included in this correspondence this evening, the township has been successful in its application for a grant through the Municipal Modernization Program. The total of the grant is for 65% of the eligible cost that we originally applied for, and that totals to $69,451. This grant was applied for to create a online customer service portal for the township of Georgian Bluffs, similar to some of our counterparts and some of our neighbors, being a virtual town hall or an online customer service portal that will allow our residents to log on and see tax bill balances, water bill balances, apply for licenses online, amend their information on the voters list, etc. So really taking our township services and making them accessible online. So through this program, township staff are evaluating how quickly we can integrate this software and the phases in which we can do so with this $69,000 initially. So this is simply for your information tonight. At a high level, we will have a further staff report to detail the project plan moving forward at a future meeting.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Deputy Mayor Carlton, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just wondering, as we're doing that online services modernization, are we looking at taking more payments online? Is that included in the project?
Brittany, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you, yes, Deputy Mayor Carlton, that will be included.
Okay. Thank you for that information, Brittany. I'll move on to the agenda. We're down to committee reports now. The recommendation is that the minutes of the committee of the whole meeting held on January 19th, 2022 be adopted, including recommendations COW 2022-01 to COW 2022-012. Someone to move to put on the floor, please. Moved by Councillor Thompson, second by Councillor Pringle. Any discussion on the motion before us? Seeing none, to show of hands, all in favor? The motion is carried. Moving on here, see if we can get caught up. We're down to staff reports, and we have none. Public question period. Madam Clerk, did anyone from the public? No? Okay, thank you. We're down to bylaws now. The first recommendation is whereas Council has given consideration to the written comments submitted by agencies in the decision on proposed zoning bylaw amendment application Z1421 for John and Pat Johnson for property located at 177964 Gray Road 18. And whereas Council has considered oral submissions made at the public meeting, therefore be it resolved that Council of the Township of Georgian Bluffs is satisfied that the proposed amendment is consistent with the provincial policy statement 2020 and other governing regulations, and the bylaw 2022-05 be read a first, second, third time, finally passed, signed by the mayor and clerk and seals of the corporation. Someone to move to put on the floor, please. Moved by Deputy Mayor Carlton, second by Councillor Colburn.
Actually, Mr. Mayor, I have a question on that one. Is that the correct address? Gray Road 18? Should it not be Highway 6?
Madam Clerk, you have your hand up.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Deputy Mayor is correct. It should be Highway 6, not Gray Road 18.
Okay, thank you. I knew that, and I just being a good boy and reading what's in front of me, but okay, that correction will be made. Is there any discussion on the motion before us? Seeing none, a show of hands, all in favor? The motion is carried. Our next recommendation is that bylaw 2022-06 being a bylaw to authorize the use of vote count equipment and alternate voting methods for 2022 municipal and school board elections be read a first, second, third time, finally passed, signed by the mayor and clerk and seals of the corporation. Someone to move to put on the floor, please. Moved by Councillor Sullivan, second by Councillor Pringle. Is there any discussion on the motion before us? Seeing none, a show of hands, all in favor? The motion is carried. Our next bylaw is animal control. The recommendation is that the committee of the whole move into closed session at
Mr. Mayor, we are now on agenda item 15.2.2, bylaw 2022-007 for animal control services.
Okay, I now got in the right place. Thank you. The recommendation is that bylaw 2022-07 being a bylaw to authorize the animal control service agreement with Owen Sound Animal Shelter be read a first, second, third time, finally passed, signed by the mayor, clerk, seals of the corporation, endorsed in the bylaw book. Someone to move to put on the floor, please. Moved by Councillor Thompson, second by Councillor Sullivan. Is there any discussion on the motion before us? Seeing none, show of hands, all in favor. The motion is carried. Down to our last bylaw here tonight. The recommendation is that bylaw 2022-08 being a bylaw to appoint a treasurer and repeal bylaw 2021-083 be read a first, second, third time, finally passed, signed by the mayor, clerk, and seals the seal of the corporation and endorsed in the bylaw book. Someone to move to put it on the floor, please. Moved by Councillor Barfoot, second by Deputy Mayor Carlton. Is there any discussion on the motion before us? Seeing none, the show of hands, all in favor. The motion is carried. We're down to unfinished business. We have none. We're down to new business. We have none.
Mr. Mayor, if I may interject.
Go ahead.
Councillor Barfoot has her hand raised.
Oh, sorry. Councillor Barfoot, please go ahead.
Okay. Backing up a bit, Mr. Mayor, thank
Sure.
you. Number 6, under presentations. After our last meeting, I had a couple phone calls about the tree cutting bylaw. And at that time, I had forwarded the messages I got to the township office. And I was hoping that the chair of the Climate Action Committee would respond to this. He was not only speaking of, for his own, because he is a tree farmer, but he spoke about 2 other tree farmers and also an arborist. And it probably would be beneficial to the community and to the committee if they heard a presentation from him. I know we're hearing, about cutting trees, but let's hear something from people that work with them all the time. I just wanted to bring that up for them. And I have sent that information on again to the chair of that committee.
Thank you, Carol.
Okay.
I'm going to let the Madam CEO speak to this.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor, to council. Trees are a topic that are on the Climate Action Committee agenda and will be on our council agenda. There's a little bit of a process that we're going to work our way through. As council may be aware, we're working with a consultant right now to put together a climate action plan that will come before council in the future. In terms of experience with a canopy kind of bylaw, I think, Councillor, you are correct. There's a lot of information that needs to be gathered. One of the things that we will be presenting as staff to the Climate Action Committee and to council in the near future is just a recommendation around gathering even some baseline data before we jump into what a tree conservation program could look like. So that will be forthcoming discussion with both the Climate Action Committee and with council. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam CEO. Councillor Barfoot, did that answer your question?
Well, sort of. I think it's important that council and staff recognize the fact that there are people out there that are willing to step forward and share the information they have through experience in that. And I would hate to see us just oh, well, that's okay. I think they should be invited to the table as well. I think we have to acknowledge people that have a vested interest.
Thank you, Councillor Barfoot. And I see the CAO shaking her head. She agrees.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Okay, I think I got everything. I'll move on to the agenda then. We're down to notice of motions, I believe, at this time. notice of, yeah. I'll read the recommendation. Whereas the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada 2015 established 94 calls to action requiring reconciliation between Canadians and Indigenous people, and whereas said calls to action include those relating to education and education for reconciliation, and whereas Council of Towns of Georgian Bus has committed to being a part of the continued dialogue on truth and reconciliation, including recognizing the annual National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. Now, therefore, Council of Towns of Georgian Bus hereby supports arranging a dedicated training session for all of Council regarding Indigenous culture training, and the staff are hereby directed to arrange said training. Someone to move to put on the floor, please. Move by Councillor Colburn, second by Councillor Sutherland. Madam Clerk, do you wish to speak to this, or?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, and I guess just to provide some brief comments as to how we're facilitating this training. So between Carly and myself, our deputy clerk, we have been contacting local First Nations communities to seek their guidance in arranging said training and understanding all of our options to arrange this training for council. In addition to that, the County of Grey is also facilitating a similar type of training at the county level. So we're working with our counterparts there to see if we can facilitate similar training to what they are as well. So there's a lot of options. Councillor Coburn had originally indicated that I believe it was the town of Mono or Minto that had received the training. So we've also reached out for contact in that regard. But we do understand that with the upcoming election kind of around the corner, we do want to get this going, and we are committed to arranging this training sooner than later.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Council, have any questions or discussion on the motion? Deputy Mayor Carlton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just wondering if our clerk is aware of a free online course through, I think it's University of Alberta, Coursera, which has to do with Indigenous training, and it's quite a comprehensive course. Explores a lot of the history, maybe not so much the reconciliation side of it, though.
Thank you, Deputy
So
Mayor.
that could be a good resource.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And just to build upon the Deputy Mayor's comments, that link and that resource is actually on the township website as part of our efforts to be a part of the education and awareness regarding Indigenous culture. So that resource is available not only for council, but for the public as well.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Councillor Colburn, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you to staff and the rest of council. I appreciate this being brought back. I've been asking for this particular training for quite some time now. I note that the motion indicates that this training is for staff. I would hope that if possible and if finances and time allow, that we would have staff able to attend this training as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Colburn. Madam Clerk, you wish to respond to
that? Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So Councillor Colburn, you're requesting that the motion be amended to include staff in the training, not just council?
I think it's important that staff be on board as well, and I would leave that decision as to which staff members would be participating to our CAO, but I would hope that some members of senior staff would be able to take that training as well.
Thank you. So, Madam Clerk, will amend the motion accordingly?
I think if council is amendable to it, we will leave it just as a motion for council and leave the direction for staff to our CAO to facilitate internally.
Okay, thank you. Is that acceptable to the council? Okay. Is there any other discussion on the motion before us? Seeing none, a show of hands, all in favor of the motion? The motion is carried. So now we're down to our next recommendation. Whereas council received an update regarding the Grey County long-term care portfolio, including the redevelopment of the Grey Gables long-term care facility from Mayor Dwight Burley at their meeting on January 12, 2022. And whereas said update was accompanied by resolutions regarding the same from councils of the municipality of Meaford and the township of Chatsworth. And whereas Council of Township of Georgian Bluffs recognizes and supports the benefits of effective and efficient long-term care services for residents of Georgian Bluffs community and Grey County as a whole. Whereas Grey Gables is a 66-bed Class A facility as classified by the Ministry of Long-Term Care. Whereas the County of Grey applied for and received development approval for Grey Gables, specifically for an additional 62-bed allocation, is considered development of new 128-bed facility. Now, therefore, Council of Township of Georgian Bluffs hereby supports the resolution forwarded by councils of municipality of Meaford and the Township of Chatsworth, and further supports a 128-bed redevelopment of Grey Gables when financially and strategically feasible, and that copies of this resolution be forwarded to all municipalities in Grey County and the Council of Grey County. Someone to move to put on the floor, please. Moved by Councilor Colburn, second by Councilor Thompson. Is there any discussion on the motion before us? Seeing none, a show of hands, all in favor, please. The motion is carried. Moving on for our agenda, Madam Clerk, we have no closed session. So I have a confirming bylaw here. The bylaw number 2022-09 being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of Council February 22nd.
Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, go ahead, Councilor Thompson.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I just noticed Councillor Barfoot's hand up. I just thought I better catch you.
Okay, Councilor Barfoot, I'll finish reading the motion and then I'll go to you before I ask for. Okay. The bylaw number 2022-09 being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of council on February 2nd, 2022 be read a first, second, third time, finally passed, signed by the mayor and clerk and seals the corporation and endorsed in the bylaw book. Someone to move just to put on the floor, please. Moved by Deputy Mayor Carlson, second by Councilor Sullivan. Councilor Barfoot, I apologize. Was your hand up?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I would like to thank my fellow Councillor Ryan. It's nice to have somebody stick up for me. Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Anyways, I don't know if this is the proper time to bring it up or not, but I need some questions answered regarding something that was said at the last closed session meeting. So how do you want to deal with it?
We can discuss it if it's a closed session. Madam or Councilor Barfoot, unless we go in close. Madam Clerk, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And if I may suggest, Councilor Barfoot, if you have a topic that you would like to discuss in closed session, please forward that to the CAO and myself, and we can ensure that's added to a future closed session agenda.
I can appreciate that, but it just would be nice. Like, as a fellow councillor, I think I'm entitled to the same information as everybody else. There were comments made at a closed session meeting.
Councilor Barfoot, I don't want to interrupt, but we can't discuss closed session discussions in open session. So I would encourage you to please make note of your concerns, forward them to the CEO and myself, and we will schedule them as appropriate.
Thank you, Madam Clerk, for your opinion. I have my opinion, and I realize we can't discuss something. What I'm asking is, when can this and when will it be done? And why does it have to be done? Why aren't the committees telling the rest of council without going through this rigmarole? I'm done.
Thank you, Councillor Barfoot. The CAO and I will reach out to ensure that your matter is scheduled for an upcoming agenda, if not the next agenda.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. I have a motion on the floor. Is there any discussion on the motion for confirming bylaw? Seeing none, a show of hands, all in favor of the motion before us? That motion is carried. Before I ask for adjournment of this meeting, our next meeting is February 9th at 5 p.m. Do I have someone to move for adjournment, please? Moved by Councillor Thompson, second by Councillor Sullivan. If there's no discussion, all those in favor of adjournment? We're now adjourned. Thank you, everybody. A nice, safe evening.